He's a classroom professor affiliating between the UTG, that's the University of the Gambia, as well as the University of Ilorin, Kwara State, Nigeria. We're going to take our first commercial break, and once we return, I'm going to speak with you more about our guest. But be reminded that this edition of the Pan-African Drive is proudly sponsored by AfriCell, exciting, beautiful, great GSM service provider in the Gambia. We'll take a short break. Once we come back, I bring Professor Saka on the show tonight.
Every time you buy credit or data, that's a speed and win waiting on your My AfriCell app. 50 megabytes, 100 megabytes, 5 gigabytes of internet data. Sitanga tanga. Credit or data purchases, spin and win wreck. AfriCell and AfriMoney, where loyalty pays and the fun never fades.
Welcome back from that short break. Just like I said earlier, before we took the break, I said that I am super proud and honored to be hosting an academician of inestimable values, someone who has been in a vanguard of all changing minds and attitude in the classroom. He is an expert in what I call strategic security from Nigeria, the professor in the Mr. Saka. Professor Saka, should I say. Welcome to this platform, sir. We're super proud to have you here tonight.
It's an honor for me to be here as well this night. And good evening to our viewers in the Gambia, the smiling coast of West Africa, and across the continent, and those in the diaspora from wherever they are watching us.
That's a super wonder from my guest. You hear that from the house's mouth. It's going to be a 1 hour intellectual marathon here on the Pan-African Drive. And we're going to be speaking on what I call the results and effects of wars and insecurity on Africa's socio-economic growth. If you do a tour across several quarters of the African continent, you see that there are wars and rumors of wars and coup d'etats and stigma and discriminations, poverty, hunger, deprivation between and amongst the populations of the continent. And it is high time that we come together under one umbrella and discuss about common analysis of problem, as well as add corresponding solutions to these concerns, or should I say challenges. And the professor is here tonight. Quickly, not to waste your time, you affiliate with the UTG as well as the University of Ilorin, Kwara State, respectively. Talk to us. How do you navigate that? It's not easy doing this between two nations with a very humbling spirit. Tell us about it.
Yeah, one of the things that guided me in the academic world in class is the opportunity to be here and there at the same time. I am a wandering spirit. Since joining the University of Ilorin, the service of the University of Ilorin in 2005, I have been the wandering spirit, like those who head cattle from one location to another has been disturbed.
But in a positive way, academic harassment.
Academic harassment, more of that nature. So I've been here and there between 2008 and 2011. Thereabout, I was in Malaysia, in between Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, the Philippines, then did a postdoc in South Africa, the Northwest, and the border between the province that border Zimbabwe, then returned back, Burkina, Senegal, was more like I am going to Lagos. Then in 2021, immediately when we are returning back from COVID, the technical aid called the Nigerian federal government assistance to Asian, Pacific and the Caribbean nation brought me to the Gambia, specifically to the University of the Gambia for a 2-year national service. And after that, Gambia becomes somewhat like a home. It's closer to Lagos, 3 hour, 30 minutes flight, direct line.
Value jet or airpiece?
Value Jet 3 hour 30 minutes, I am in Lagos. So it's more like I am flying from Maiduguri in northeastern Nigeria to Lagos, like I am flying from
I think I will have to apologize to my boss there, because this is almost like a free advert for that. I don't want to mention that anymore.
So we are not going to. But as the crow flies,
of course,
it's a 3 hour 30 minute journey, and thus, even though it wore apart, there are multiple nations in between, but it still felt like home, and it is closer to home on a direct flight, and thus within that context it is easier for me to navigate between the UTG and as well as the University of Ilorin. I have given 20 years to the University of Ilorin, so no matter how much Gambian becomes home, the source will still be the University of Ilorin, and I will still have the cause to return back and return back. I have been leaving the university and returning back and returning back, and thus here is more home. Nigeria is actually home, where my placenta was buried, but within the context of Africa, wherever I see myself, wherever I think I can add value to young mind, help to shape mind, shape perspective.
You do that without reservation.
I see that as home, so long as it is within the continent. Anywhere within Africa, particularly sub-Saharan sections of the continent, is home for me.
That's a strong and beautiful one there from you, Professor. I'm really inspired hearing that from you, as a classroom lecturer as well. So it's beautiful hearing that from you, that you can just move anywhere and make it your home and add value to the larger society. This show is 1 hour, and I want to get the best out of you for young people to change their minds and attitude, considering the topic we're having in discussion. Quickly, as an expert in strategic
security and strategic study,
how important, how crucial is your area of specialization in contemporary African politics and governance structure, considering all of the dynamics of wars and rumors of wars and insurgency, insecurity?
I will start by saying that the most important and basic essence of the state is that of providing security of life and property. It then means that in the absence of peace and security, development cannot be driven. Growth cannot be possible and actualized. Growth comes before development. If growth is hampered by instability, whether political instability in relation to governance or insecurity in relation to war and civil conflict, the bottom line is that growth and development take a drive. They take a flight.
It becomes alien.
It becomes alien. So within that context, and given the fact that inherent in every human society, not necessarily a state, wherever you see 2-3 people sitting together, you will always see divergent opinion. Divergent opinion is the basis of disagreement. Disagreement spill into open confrontation. Open confrontation become conflict. So within that context, we need those who specialize in teaching, in researching, in engaging in community and policy advocacy about the importance of accommodation, cooperation. It's very crucial, central. No society is devoid of social conflict. What is important is for conflict not to become violent. Inherent in every human society is social conflict. And thus, if social conflict is inherent in every human society, then it means in order for us to minimize the destructive impact of social conflict, in order for us to ensure that social conflict does not become destructive in its manifestation, we need to understand and study what are the factors driving social conflict, and how do we ameliorate, address, accommodate, and manage such divergent social dynamics, such that we can then build the cause of peace, of accommodation, of tolerance, and as well as of cooperation, so that society can then move, so that the state, the political establishment, the state can then be able to do the service that form the basis, the purpose for which it is established. In terms of the necessary dividend of why do we establish a modern nation state? It is because there is states, there are law, there are rules, there are regulation. That is the reason why I will not take a knife and stab you, because I know that if I do that, then the question will be, why did you do it? And if I am not very careful, 20, 30 years of that person's life will be spent behind the bar. And such, to that extent, states provide rules, laws, regulation that guide human interaction. And thus, the state, it becomes important for us to study the state, to study social configuration of society, and then point out areas, issues that can generate social tension, and how we can navigate those social tensions through policy, through initiative, through programs that tend to build rather than divide.
So that's the nature and scope for a strategic security expert.
That is the nature of a tip.
Okay.
Because security and strategic study, as a branch of political science, is wide. It talks about conflict. It talks about nation security, both in terms of the hard security, the military, and state security. It also talks about human security, which is the non-hard nature of security, economy, food, security, youth unemployment, and the way it can become a basis for insecurity, environment, among many other things. And so security and strategic study look holistically at conflict, security, peace development issue. Then you pick whatever. I can focus attention exclusively on environment and security. And I will still be a professor of security and strategic study.
That's beautiful. I listened to you, Libya, most of the countries you've been, based on your experience as a classroom professor, so to speak. With your experience across several quarters of Africa, I know that my nation, Liberia, will have a very different cultural background, political structure, and so to speak. Those in Zimbabwe, those in Zambia, and other nations you've experienced all have differences, and so to speak, in our patterns of life. But based on your experience as a professor, as a classroom, as a driver of young people's mind in terms of attitude change, what do you think are the most common problems that are being experienced between and amongst the nation states of the continents of Africa?
One of the greatest challenge for that is militating against the realization of African greatness is governance. The bane of our development challenge is governance. Irrespective of what you talk about as the cause of a particular conflict or crisis or social problem, you see an element of governance or misgovernance or failing governance or veiled governance. When societies are properly governed, when contending problem issues, tensions are properly managed in a manner that tend to unite, in a manner that tend to be fair, just, equitable, everybody then tend to understand that I have a stake. If you have a stake in something, except you wouldn't want to destroy something that you have a stake in. So one of the most significant bane of the development challenge in sub-Saharan Africa is the governance crisis. If we are able to solve our governance issue, and governance in this instance, I am using it within the context of a broad usage of governance, whether you talk about institutions of the state, whether you talk about the constitution and the way it's constitutionalism, the way it is planted, the way it is executed, should be that whatever punishment that is applicable to you for a violation of the law, irrespective of who you are, irrespective of who are your parents, irrespective of your social standing within society, that punishment should be executed on you. If I then tend to think because of your social status, you are able to get a pass or a slap on the wrist, And whereas other people commit the same infraction and they spend decade behind bar, then the question is that we have, through the law, we have created social injustice. Those that tend to see others as getting a pass, we automatically start having resentment against those that they think society benefit more from society other than them. And if you are not very careful, that is the basis of youth resentment, of a small political problem spilling over, becoming a social protest. Protest that is peaceful today, the following morning when protesters converge, then you start seeing arson that is specifically targeting certain important businesses, districts, attacking peoples, attacking their property. That animosity that drive arson within the context of protest was not animosity that comes into the person right at the site of the protest. They are animosity that have been built over time, and those animosities are built because of certain perception that there is social injustice, and those injustices then start growing animosity, they nurture it, and for the opportunity to express anger against the state, but in so doing, against society, those animosities spill into the open, then it becomes a free-for-all.
That's great to hear from you, Prof. We're talking about the resultant effects of wars and insecurity on Africa's socio-economic development. You hear from Nigeria, the most popular black nation of the world, a nation that is endowed with virtually everything.
I see myself as being born in Nigeria, but I belong to West Africa first and foremost.
I believe that. I respect that and honor that. I also say the same, that I hear from Liberia, but I belong to the rest of the continents of Africa. That's why we are here in the first place.
Yes.
Building bridges between and amongst Africans. Your nation, Nigeria, one would say that Nigeria experienced 3 years of civil war.
Yeah.
1967 to 1970, the Biafra Civil War that was started all the way in 1914 through the amalgamation of all the North and the Southern protectorates, and jumping to what we call the Civil War that took place. But in a practical sense, that war has not ended. Traced to tribal distinctions or struggles for power, so to speak. Why is it that Nigeria has struggled to actually graduate from what she experiences as a state, even though she's very instrumental to the rest of the African continent, but she has struggled to find the solution to the insurgency in the country?
If we go back to the Biafran War or the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970, it's very important for us to understand that there are multiple factors, but of course, ethnic animosity within this context, ethnic nationality, not tribe, because in the context of sociology, tribe is degrading. To call a group a tribe is degrading. And since we are projecting and promoting African unity and greatness, ethnic nationality better capture sociologically groups that speak the same language, that have the same myth of origin, share similar values and word look.
But that would just be a beautiful way of putting it, but it still doesn't erase the fact that it is the issue of the tribe.
Within the context of...
I agree with you.
Within the context of layman discussion,
yes,
we said tribe.
Yeah.
But within the context of academic discussion of group of people that share certain commonality, we said it is ethnic nationality, Onego, Tite, and the rest of them, the scholars of sociology, what they use and what they encourage us to use when we are referring to a group of people that share language is ethnic nationality. Nigeria is an amalgam of different ethnic nationality. Some classifications say 250, some say 300. Within the context of ethnic nationality, it might not be up to 500, but within the context of linguistic differences, it can be up to that. Within the Yoruba nation, there is the standard Oyo Yoruba, which is the written, the documented Yoruba, but there are Ekiti Yoruba, there is Ondo Yoruba, there is Ilaje Yoruba, which means within the same socio-cultural Yoruba nation, there are dialectics differences. Practically every Yoruba will be able to speak the standard or your Yoruba, but they might also speak a different dialect of Yoruba, that if you did not come from that community, it may be very difficult for you to have a clear understanding. And thus, let's leave the language, Nigeria is an amalgam of these nations. The three most important of them, the Hausa Fulani. The Hausa Fulani, we tend to lump them together, but Hausa and Fulani are actually different ethnic nationality. We see the Fula here. The Hausas are different. The Fulani of Nigeria are different from the Hausas in terms of ethnic categorization. The language is different, the culture is different. But when the jihad come and the Fulani then take the language of the Hausas that they have vanquished, then the amalgam becomes unified, understandable, and but that does not mean in northern Nigeria, particularly in the northwest, there is the based on of the Hausa Fulani, there are no differences in terms of I am an Hausa proper and you are a Fufude, a Fulani. And thus, if you take the three most important, those who inherit the post-colonial Nigerian state from the British, there is that struggle between them in relation to struggle for power and domination within the emergent. Even as at the 60s, it is still the most populous. The nation that we tend to see as having the dream to carry the African unity and development drive forward. Then the military coup occurred. And the coup seems to resort into one political leader from a particular section, spare, by whatever magic, then from the southwest and from the northern region, political leaders, military leaders were exterminated in the course of the coup, which then led to a counter coup, which then led to pogrom against the Igbos in the north, which then led to Ojukwu declaring the eastern Nigeria, which in itself is not essentially an Igbo, a purely Igbo ethnic nationality. There are the people of the Niger Delta.
I think the core Igbos ones is the Anambra,
Enugu, and the rest of them. But in the Delta, there is Ijo, there are the Ijo, there is the Efik, there is the Anang. Those who are the Rifarai are not Igbos, even though they might have linguistic similarity, like the Equerries in Rivers have linguistic similarity, they bear Igbo's name, but an Equerry is not an Igbo person. And thus, even when we look at it, the old eastern region is not monolithic in terms of ethnic nationality.
But Prof, quickly, just because we have several areas to enter, if you want to be very deductive and objective, why do you think that insurgency, that misunderstanding, the conflict and stigma and discrimination between amongst Nigerian people has not met its survivability in terms of solution?
The war has ended on the battlefield, but in the mind and the subconsciousness of many, the war has not ended. There is this animosity between the ethnic nationality, animosities that are often fanned by political leaders as they struggle for power, for relevance, for authority. And there is also the religious divide that plays into the ethnic divide, which plays into the struggle for power and authority between and among political leaders. There is the we against them. There is the intentional erasure of history. Often than not, people don't tend to understand. They tend to get one-sided story of the Civil War. There can be multiple truths about the Civil War, right? Unfortunately, from every angle, from each of the angles of the protagonists, people only want to narrate the story as they see it, forgetting the fact that on an important social issue as the Nigerian Civil War, there can be, and there will definitely be, multiple narratives. And the fact that there are multiplicity of narrative does not mean one narrative is wrong while the other is right. Competing narrative can be right at the same time, which then bring us back to, after the war ended on the battlefield, have we been able to sit down together as a people of difference, but then tend to look at what unify us.
To have a conversation.
And have a conversation around the war. Have a conversation around the war of what caused it, how does it pan out, where is every side as far as the Nigerian Civil War as its own blame. How do we share the blame, then come out frankly and tell ourselves that the war has ended, we have learned our mistake. How do we chart a future?
In essence,
that how do we chart a future that tend to reify our unity in the context of diversity? You often see Nigerians talking about unity and diversity, but it is on the tongue.
Yeah.
It's not something that find expression in the way and manner different nationality treat one another.
Okay.
Yeah, you might be in Lagos, in part of southwestern Nigeria, and you see the freeness of the Yoruba, but sometimes when someone when you are a visitor in someone's house, even if you are neighbors, that still does not mean that you overstay your welcome or you poke hand in the eyes of your host.
That's right.
within the context of a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic, multi-religious federal system. Holding Nigeria together is a challenge in itself, because of the diversity. But that diversity ought to be strength, ought to become strength if it is properly managed. Unfortunately, post-Civil War, we have had governance challenges. There is not only political, there is also about social re-engineering of the Nigerian state. So there are challenges within that, which then mean that what can feed unity,
the
catalyst that can feed sense and consciousness of unity, even within the context of diversity, is not properly nourished and nurtured.
Perhaps even missing.
Maybe.
Okay, quickly, using the context of Nigeria, because like I always say, 1 out of every 5 Africans is a Nigerian.
I wouldn't want to say that, because
well, I would say that, and it's evident. It's evident. It's glaring. So let's look at our own nation, Liberia. We experienced 14 years civil war that was traced to the big gap between the American Liberians, if you like, the descendants of the free slaves, and the indigenous Liberians.
In the coast and those in the hinterland.
And then today, if you go to the Central African Republic, the experience, you know better. You go to Kenya today, you understand that it's terrific there. Go to the Congo, since the date of Jean Ahebukasa, you know, it's dangerous. It's getting risky across Africa. Somalia been blamed for the Congo experience that is going on still now and all that.
Sudan.
You said Nigeria as a case study. To what extent does war and insecurity undermine or impact negatively the social economic development of our one continent?
At the beginning, I said where there is lack of peace and security, growth and development take a flight and they run away. War undermines a lot of things. Civil strife undermines a lot of things. People tend to talk about Nigeria as one of the most resource. It is resource in terms of people, and that people is not just number. It's resource in terms of people that have built human capacity, right? Particularly from the South. And it is not only in the South. Even the narratives in northern Nigeria is changing in relation to education, human capacity development, and the resources that Nigeria has that it can be proud of is actually human capacity development. Okay. That is what Nigeria can export and make money out of. Okay. Not just oil, not gold, but if we return back to natural resources and the way and conflict, you will find out that in every of conflict in Africa, you will see the imprint of resources. Struggle over who gets what, when, and how. The classic definition of politics. You see it manifesting in state resources. And when I say state resources, I did not mean diamond in Sierra Leone, which fuel the Second Liberian War, or which fueled the Sierra Leone War, and one of the most destructive anyway in terms of its impact on the Sierra Leonean population, you tend to see governance, failed governance, giving rise to multiple social challenges, things that are not supposed to become challenges in the absence of governance that is just, that is fair, then tend to become challenges that divide society. Then you see one issue having overlapping influence over another. When you talk about northern Nigeria and Boko Haram, for instance, you tend to see people talking about Islamists, this, that, blah, but there is element of the struggle for resources, especially land, water, right? As desertification comes, a large swath of those whose main socioeconomic livelihood is on animal grazing. As desertification comes, as climate change occur, their livelihood is getting wiped out. These are people that have gone, which they use when they have animal, that to protect against wild animal. This gun becomes an instrument because they must have to live. If the state is unable to properly manage its territory, then you will see infiltration. We talked about ungoverned space. Some space in northern Nigeria are ungoverned. When you have national forest that you cannot determine when and when issue. When you cannot determine this is this, and this is the person that is here, this is the person that is here, it then means there is vacuum, lack of control of the state. Then nature harbors, nature's dislike vacuum. When there is vacuum, the tendency is that vacuum will be filled by an authority that is sub-state authority, that is non-state authority, which will be violent. And thus, when you look at the conflict in Sudan, people tend to see ethnic nationality conflict between the Arabis and Islamites, part of Darfur, and those who we tend to see as black sub-Saharan Africa. But that is not the cause of the conflict. It becomes another social issue that work on resource struggle. All right? Yeah. So you go to the Congo. The Congo is even the most endowed state in sub-Saharan Africa, in the whole of the continent. And since independence in 1960, Congo has not known peace. Meaning that when there is governance challenges, resources that is supposed to be catalysts for development become a cause. And in conflict literature, in security and strategic studies literature, there is what we refer to as the resource cost. When resources that is supposed to spur development is misgoverned, certain segment of society tend to have grudge, particularly those where the resources is located. They have grudge against the state, and before you know it, the grudge spill into the open. Then it becomes violence. One of the most consequential work that I've done in the Gambia is on the sand cost, sand mine, environmental degradation, and conflict, looking at Katong, Frababanta. We are a smaller country.
I'm going to hold you there a little bit. We have to have our first break shortly. Once we return, then you speak more on that issue. Keep that in mind. We'll take our first break, and then shortly we'll come back and we'll continue with Prof. Saka here tonight, where you have an opportunity to tap into this fountain of knowledge as he speaks on what I call the results and effect of wars and insecurity on Africa's socio-economic development. We'll take our break shortly.
We've got fantastic new social media bundles just for you. Here are your options.
50 megabytes for $10 is valid for 1 day.
Enjoy 400 megabytes for $40, valid for 7 days.
Get a massive 1,200 megabytes for $100 is only, valid for 7 days.
Simply dial *120# and press 3 to pick the social media bundle that suits you best. Subscribe now.
Why settle for one when you can talk with two? With the AfriCell TOK service. For just $99, you get a massive 1,200 minutes of talk time to share between your two favorite people. To activate, dial *135#, select your two AfriCell numbers, and you're locked in for a full month of conversations. AfriCell, connecting you to your peoples.
Welcome back from that short break here. You right here on the Pan-African Drive with me, Tony Michael Howard, with Professor Sagat as he speaks on the results and the effect of war and insecurity on the socio-economic development for our one continent, Africa. Prof, just before we talk about break, you were talking about one of your areas of assignment here in the Gambia. Can you go back to that issue?
Yes, I was talking about the fact that behind every conflict, every violent outbreak of conflict in sub-Saharan Africa is the issue of governance. Issue of governance that is linked to resource governance. And when the rent from resources is seen to not to be properly managed for the benefit of, first and foremost, the entirety of the community, but specifically areas where resources are tapped. Anywhere where you have resource exploitation, there is going to be negative implication on the environment. And those who bear the negative consequences of mineral exploitation need to be specially taken care of the proceed. And you then tend to see that many conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa that have been tied to resources, it's not about the resource in itself, but about how the rent that the resource generated is governed and managed. And thus, many of the conflicts in Africa, the genesis is failing governance. Either failing governance in relation to the way and manner we are unable to properly manage the diversity in our society, that creates failed management of social diversity, which spill out into group animosity, which become an avenue for conflict. Either resources, if it is properly managed, if the governance around resources is opaque such that resources are mined, the royalty, the rent that comes from it, tend to get into escrow account of a leader, and we don't see the development benefit of the resources. It will generate resentment, especially from the people where their area bear the negative environmental consequences of mining. If it is about mismanagement of public wealth, it will generate resentment. If it's about religion that is not properly managed and regulated, it is going to generate resentment. And all of this, when you pack them together, one issue have overlapping implication on the other, and it generates conflict. Then you tend to then see that which serves as the trigger for the conflict. You tend to say this is the cause of the conflict. Whereas in conflict study, there are the trigger, the immediate cause of conflict. There are the remote cause of conflict. Okay. The Yoruba used to say, my masquerade is dancing on top of water. The drummer is underneath the ocean.
You want to say that in Yoruba a bit so that your people hear that?
Yes, the Yoruba used to say, that which drum for that masquerade that is dancing on top of water. What is feeding the masquerade dancing is the drummer that is underneath the ocean. And thus, we tend to, when we study conflict in sub-Saharan Africa, we tend to look at the proximate, the immediate cause. That one that is this trigger. When you pour petrol down, right? When you pour petrol down, or you mistakenly horn a gas, it's not going to generate fire.
No.
It will only generate fire when there is a spark.
Of course.
And so, the petrol that you pour down is the remote causes of fire. Okay. The spark is what brings the fire.
So the spark is more of the catalyst.
The spark is the catalyst. Okay. So when we talk about conflict in sub-Saharan Africa, we tend to look at the spark, and thus we try to address the spark. Okay. If we address the spark without, which is the trigger, without addressing the remote causes, the underlying, that which build resentment and nurture it, we are never going to have peace. And that is one of the major problems with the Congo. We are treating each insurgency as they emerge without treating the foundation of the Congolese state, which generates the problem, right? The M23 rebel, this one, insurgency in Kivu, in Goma, in Lumumbashi,
emergence from Africa.
Everywhere we tend to see resources, the will to control resources, but there is also the political problem, the governance challenges of the Congolese state from when the CIA masterminded the assassination of Patrick Lumumba, and how that become the genesis of the disintegration of the Congolese state, right? People talks about the conflict in Sierra Leone, they talks about diamond, conflict diamond, blood diamond. Diamond is not the cause of the conflict. It's just the spark, the trigger. There is inherent underlying social issues that is either ethnic, governance problem, or other forms, a combination of other factors, which then create animosity and resentment. What resources in conflict tend to do is that it gives spark to conflict, and it also helps to elongate the lifespan of conflict. In Casamance, people talk about timber and forest resources. They are not the genesis of crisis in Casamance. The crisis in Casamance is about neglect of a region, so governance issue. It's just a spark that give catalyst, because for you to prosecute large-scale insurgency against the state, you need resources. Those who support your insurgency abroad, they are not supporting it based on altruistic value. They need you to give them something. The resources of your region, you give to them so that they can then give you the means to launch an insurgency against the state. So the resources serve as a spark. Their resources also help to elongate the lifespan of conflict. But that's there. If we then tend to ask, what are the socio-economic ramifications of conflict in sub-Saharan Africa? One of the most important issue is loss of life. Did you know how many hundreds of thousands of lives that have been lost, or that will be lost in just the space of 1 year for conflict, numerous conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa? The Nigerian Civil War resulted in the loss of 3 million people. As at 1967, 1970, God forbid, if that kind of a war is waged today in Nigeria, the life that will be lost will be in 10 of the number that we recorded between 1967 and 1970. Just within 1 year or thereabout, look at the Sudan and look at the loss of life. One of the greatest casualties of African conflicts and crisis is the loss of human life. The loss of life, inclusive of the loss of the life of innocent young men and women, those that are supposed to be the future of Africa, we continue to lose a sizable segment of what should constitute the future of this continent to needless, reckless, senseless, and irresponsible war. What can you say is the reason for the war in Sudan, between the Sudanese army after the fall of Omar al-Bashir, between the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces?
Yes, the struggle for power.
The struggle for power.
State resources. Personal aggrandizement.
But that is facilitated and is made possible because there is resources to prosecute the war.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
United Arab Emirates has been implicated in the war of the Sudan for supporting the rapid support force. And in supporting the rapid support force, through weapons, through all that it needs to prosecute the war, it gets gold, raw gold, from the Sudan in return. Right?
Trade
by barter. You give this, you give this, then we give you this. So the loss of life is one of the most important casualties of war in sub-Saharan Africa. Then destruction of infrastructure. If you watch Khartoum, when the war is about entering Khartoum, you see property that is destroyed, state infrastructure, what you use billion, some of these billion, you borrow them, of course, to build.
You've not even paid back.
And you have not even paid back.
Destroyed.
And those resources are then destroyed. The decimation of state resources, resources of community, and the resources and property of individual suffer casualty in the context of war. Indeed, when war reach or violence, large-scale violence, reach a particular community, people are not going to think about their property.
No.
They will think about their life first, and thus they run. It's only when they return back after semblance of peace has been established, when they return back, that they now come to rule their property that have been destroyed. Some people, everything they work for all their life, within the space of one minute, is destroyed.
Yeah,
it becomes ash.
History.
It becomes history. And it is not only in the context of war, even in the context of civil strife and violence, resources can be destroyed. In the context of the NSAS protests in Lagos, majorly in Lagos, but in other part of Nigeria, lives were lost, but not only lives were lost. TVC properties were destroyed. TVC television stations was destroyed. BRT buses, the bus rapid transport of the Lagos state government, brand new in their park. They have never been used. Lagos state government used part of its resources, part of resources that it borrowed from international financial institutions guaranteed by the Nigerian state. The park was entered into, the buses were vandalized. Hundreds of buses, long, luxurious buses with AC, they were burned down within a twinkle of an eye. Before night break, all of the buses are gone. Not that they were stolen, they were destroyed. Police stations were burned down to ashes. All of those things.
And Prof, if that happens, now government now struggles. Resources that are meant for other institutions building will be diverted to restoring the survivability of those institutions, thus undermining the efforts and credibility of the other institutions that would have benefited the resources.
We want development. But when we have agitations against the state, and we allow it, especially African youth, if we allow our discontent, political, socio-economic discontent against the state, if we allow it in the process of expressing it through protest, if we allow it to spill and become violent, what we are fighting for, which is the need for the state to develop so that we can have meaningful engagement, so that we don't have to take the back way and run, or take the Sahara Desert, we will use our hand to destroy. We will use our hand to destroy what is meant to benefit us. And thus, the destruction of public property, of private property, is also one of the casualties of war and civil strife in sub-Saharan Africa. When lives are lost, when public properties and private properties are destroyed, economic decline will automatically set in. There is no nation that is in the throes of large-scale political violence or civil war that you talks about growth in positive terms. No. You will have to talk about how do we salvage the economy. Of course. Then, when you return back to semblance of peace, it might take you 5 years before GDP growth pick up again. During COVID, just because the economy was shut down, the infrastructure of the economy was not destroyed, but the economy was shut down as a result of restriction on movement. 2020, 2021, nations that can said we recorded a GDP growth rate of 1-2% are not many.
In fact, even there are still countries that are still struggling.
That are still struggling of COVID. Now, it is because COVID resulted in restriction, not the destruction of the infrastructure that sustained the economy. Now then look at a situation where war resulted in the destruction of infrastructure that sustained, that served as the foundation of economic activity. Then what did you think is going to happen? We will have to rebuild the infrastructure first before economic growth can then pick up. And thus, economic decline is also one of the casualties. When economic decline, gross domestic product, gross national product, purchasing power parity, everything comes down. When economy does not grow, gross national product witness negative growth, gross domestic product witness negative growth, national income, that is the GDP divided by population, everything comes down, right? What you have, the gradual development that you are recording, struggling to record in the context of other numerous challenges that you are facing. If these challenges were not properly managed, it spilled into open confrontation becomes war. Then, gross domestic product, gross national product, national income, everything take a nosedive. It's more like if a plane that is mid-flight lose one of its engine and you are the pilot is trying to salvage, then the second engine catch fire. What did you think is going to happen? It's coming down. It's like we said, there are no two ways about it. It's like when you said the human kidney, one packed up, they said you can manage the other one if you are not very careful and you do recklessly, and the second one also pack up.
So you are history.
Everything. So within the context of destruction of public-private infrastructure, which resulted into economic decline, growth, and national income, everything come crashing down. Another major important impact, negative, of conflict in sub-Saharan Africa is population displacement. Indeed, I should have mentioned it as the second after loss of life.
Which is very key.
Which is very key.
It affects the human resource base of the state.
There is population displacement.
Of course.
Africa, but before the Syrian civil war and before the war in Afghanistan resulted into millions moving across Eastern Europe and destination, Western Europe, in particular Germany, even at the height of the Syrian conflict, sub-Saharan Africa still continued to be the largest generator of two forms of displacement. Displacement as a refugee, displacement as internally displaced person. When conflict arises, people will run. They will run for their life. The process of running for their life is displacement. That conflict that comes to meet them in their community will chase them out of their community. As it is chasing them out of their community, as they are running away to save their life with the notion that when there is life, there is hope. If I survive this war, I can rebuild after the war. People will then have to be displaced outside of their community. Often than not, they can be displaced when they cross international border. They become refugee. The laws that guided refugee and care for them, the international law of refugee, then take precedence. The states that they cross into its border is expected to, within the context of humanity,
like we experiencing would be the Sudanese in the Central African Republic.
In the Central Africa.
And 40 million people internally displaced in multiple out of the states in the Central African Republic, with Central African Republic of all her own havoc as well.
Thank you for mentioning that. The most annoying, the most disturbing part is that Central African Republic in itself is a refugee, an IDP generating state. But when Sudan implode, people of Central African Republic that run to Sudan had to run back to Central Africa. Then the Sudanese that is their host before are now had to. So a country can be welcoming refugee and as well as at the same time be a refugee generating country.
That's right, Prof. It's unfortunate we're driving close to the end of this 1 hour marathon for intellectual sophistry. But I come back to you, Prof. What's the way forward? How do we revive post-conflict nations?
Rebuilding is always problematic. But in order for us to rebuild, we have to take stock of what drives us into conflict in the first instance. Okay. Take stock of that. Take lesson from those issues, then use them as catalysts positively to rebuild, right? You destroy within 1 minute. What you destroy in 1 minute, it takes ages to rebuild. And unfortunately, when society is in the process of rebuilding from destruction, irrespective of what is the nature of destruction. Youth in Africa tend to be impatient.
Okay.
Nation building process is one brick at a time. It's a process that have to be addressed with patience, not with hot blood. Because if you use hot blood to approach rebuilding process, you will destroy all over again. Right. So you have a wound, the wound has not healed, you do reckless, then another wound on top of the other one. It becomes a complex problem. So I think one major thing that we need to work on, that our political leaders, our community leaders, those who are leaders of thought in sub-Saharan Africa are to continue to preach, is we need to preach the message of governance, of good governance. Good governance in relation to how we organize our political system, political competition, how we exercise power and authority in a manner that it seems to be free, to be fair, just, equitable, right? How we govern society and its complexity, such that one group does not see itself as a loser in the context of social relationship. Because the moment you have one group seeing itself as a loser in the context of social relationship, that group that sees itself as a loser, even if that is a perception, is not the reality, you are sleeping
for breeding conflict.
Yeah, it will breed conflict, not possibility. It must always breed conflict.
Prof, permits me to use this very opportunity to invite you for the second time on the show, because this 1 hour is not enough for you. I got to bring you back here. This is an open invitation. The viewers are listening, they're watching. I strongly believe too many people want to see you some other time. Please, just before we take leave of you, 1 minute divided into two, that's 30 seconds. Speak to the Yoruba-speaking people of Nigeria on the way forward in terms of unifying spirit for that nation, Nigeria, in 30 seconds, and then you come back in 30 seconds for the rest of the African continent. Wait for.
I think for the Yoruba, it's màá sọ pé a gbọ́dọ̀ fẹ́ràn ọmọlàkejì wa bá a ṣe fẹ́ràn ara wa. The way you love yourself, you love thy neighbor the way you love yourself. Tá a bá fẹ́ràn ọmọlàkejì wa bá a ṣe fẹ́ràn ara wa, ntí a lè gbà, what we cannot take, we will not extend it to others. Things that we know if it is done to us, is going to generate anger in us, we will not do it to others. Back to the rest of the continent, it's important for us to know that if there's anything that we share as Africans, I'm not talking of those up the Sahara, but those of us down the Sahara, there is this blackness in all of us. And the blackness also come, even though our languages and tongue differ, yet those languages that differ take roots from similar source. The Congo, the Bantu, the Nile Congo language family, which then means that there are many things that unite us than that which divide us. The nature of the post-colonial state means that ethnic nationality are spilled across border. The Jolas in Casamas, the Jolas in Fonyi. They are Jolas, right? Which then means that even within the context of the post-colonial Gambian state and the post-colonial Senegalese state, the Jolas have a lot of things in common, but they are divided between two nations. The same way the Yorubas are divided between Nigeria, Benin Republic, and you see some of them in Togo.
Even in Ghana.
And even in Ghana, the Ewe. So then the question is, we need to look at those things that unify us, and we should then need to build, to strengthen, to nourish that which unify us, and try as much as possible to work on constructively those that divide us. If we are able to manage and strengthen those social cultural, economic, political issue that united us, if we work on them, strengthen them, and we work on those that divide us and manage them constructively, those that unite us will tend to give us strength, which will give us the capacity and the ability, the foresight to see ourselves as one. And whereas we also understand the fact that there are differences, but those differences does not mean we are not the same.
Thank you, Prof. It's been a very beautiful experience having you on the show tonight. That's why I give it an open invitation to be back here on the show.
I will be back.
Please, those of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, this remains a Pan-African Drive with me. So let me kill Howard, a platform meant to inspire and motivate the current generation of young Africans in the actualization of the respective dream, but most importantly, the African unity. To our Yoruba speaking people before Nigeria say to you, Baonisha, Otutojo Menta, those of you I haven't seen, to the southeastern part of the country, Igbos that say to you, one name the number, Ikaraka Ijie, Mechiku Abiyama, Amama Masiamasi, Oshimilia Tata, Ekue Mechiku Kike, Odukwa Kataka, strengthening all of you wherever you are under the sound of my voice, to the northern part of Nigeria that is dominantly Islamic, I say to you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. To my Liberian people in Pele, I say, Kumani Jukakole Kalen Liberia Kalen, Kukle Kukatono, we are all one. To the Sierra Leone people that say to you, Unakusheo, of course, to French-speaking nations of the continent, I say to you, merci, merci, dans de vous supporter. To Swahili-speaking nations, I say to you, asante sana, that's thanks so much, asante sana, kumfutanya zangu, to Southern African nations, South Africa, in KwaZulu-Natal, I say to you, Sanbunane Mzanzi, Guyana Bengelela, to Botswana and Sesona, I say to you, read about hell about Linting Jahao, to Gambia and Fula, I say, me Edema Moja, to the wall of Jedejef, Domalamuna Fate, Domalamusa Fate, say, I don't know to the Madinga, I say, thanks so dearly much for joining us on the Pan-African Driver. Catch us next Wednesday on a fresh edition of this show, and I'll be bringing Prof back on the show because 1 hour is not enough. Thank you. It's been with me, Tony Michael Howe, CKA, Neil Socrates. And the quote of the day says, the wine that is not enough for the entire village should not intoxicate one man. I repeat, the wine that is not enough for the entire village should not intoxicate one man. Should I explain better? Some other time. Catch you. Bye-bye.
You can now turn your loyalty points into data or voice bundles. Simply dial *772#, press 1 to check how many points you've got, press 2 to redeem those points. Recharge on AfriCell, buy credit on AfriMoney, buy cash power. Lord Everett, you get points. Even when you redeem, your total points still stack up, giving you a chance to win one of 2 luxury AfriCell villas. AfriCell, 25 years of rewarding loyalty, and we're just getting started.